morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of WG Hub Live. I'm Eamon Rod, MD of Wall Goodman, and today we're focusing on risk. It's about property, people, returning to work, and how the pandemic basically affects your insurance, your liabilities, that sort of thing. So welcome back to all those who joined us last week. And for our new viewers, please feel free to use the chat function. So I'd like to introduce you to today's guest speakers and today's panelist. A very warm welcome to Sarah Eades and Jason Daniells from A1 Insurance Group. They're today's guest panelists, guest speakers. We also have a guest panelist in Melanie Davis, an employment HR specialist from Blanchard's Bailey. She's going to come on the panel after the speakers just to help. And if you've got any sort of legal issues as well, or relating to these presentations, she can join in with that. So hopefully we've got Sarah Reed's presentation coming up very shortly, and we can move on for today's event.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see some of you here today. So hopefully we can give a bit of an insight. My role as operations director for A1 Insurance is a bit of a catch-all in the sense that I look after human resources, health and safety, looking after the risk management within the organisation as well as looking after making sure that obviously the insurance side of things is kind of fully protected. So for me, hopefully we'll cover quite a few bits and pieces that you might need within your organisation. And really help you to look at where you can really minimise some of your exposures from the risk side. I will make apologies if there's any crossovers from last week with Mandy's presentation. That a lot of things do dovetail in terms of the HR side of things, health and safety, and also your insurance. So if there is some repetition, it's just because it is that important. Realistically, what we want to try and do is look at how we can mitigate your risks as well as directors and owners of your own business, what with the full changes that are kind of going on. And originally I was going to kind of look at how everyone is feeling about returning to work and how that actually varies. But I think probably listening to some of the conversations from last week, that the trepidation and the uncertainty of what's going to happen is probably quite key and different for every single person. So please do use the questions and answers throughout, and we'll kind of cover those up to hopefully mitigate everyone's different concerns, because they will be different depending on the number of employees you've got, the behaviour and the culture of your business, as well as what kind of business you're kind of functioning in. Really what we want to kind of look at is adapting to a new normal. I think we probably all appreciate that there is going to be some changes. The old ways of how we work might not necessarily be the new ways of the future. And this is a really good opportunity from not just a working practices point of view, but also from an insurance perspective, of actually assessing what's currently working, because this will have an impact moving forward on your risks and what you disclose as material facts to your insurers moving forward. So it's a good opportunity to get you thinking about what currently works with your remote workers or your reduced working patterns, looking at how is your business adapted and what you would like to keep, change and remove. Use this as a good opportunity to what you would like to keep and change, because this will actually steer your insurance risks a lot better moving forward and be a lot clearer from your insurers, and actually might reduce some of the mid-term adjustments and things like that you might have moving forward, which again in turn might actually save you some money. And look at actually, is the current new normal more efficient and more productive, and effectively, is this an opportunity to change? One of the things that we've kind of looked at from the risk assessment side of things is actually the full-on practicalities, and communication is absolutely key with your employees throughout. From our own experience, so we've got over 120 staff. From our own experience, when we first started lockdown and having all our workers at home, we thought they would actually all kind of struggle and would actually want to come back into the office sooner rather than later. in fact, now they've kind of all experienced being at home, it has actually not only been more productive for us, but it has actually led to a lot of other workers wanting a lot more flexibility. So that's going to be a big key change. And again, looking at their own concerns from a mental well-being state of mind as to how they actually feel themselves about coming back into the office, and taking that into account. So I would strongly suggest literally looking at the communication angle right from the get-go with all your employees. And don't underestimate the preparation time that it actually takes to go back into the office. You might all be at varying different stages about how to go back, but from our own experience, just actually writing and doing some of the back office risk assessments and health and safety has taken, a couple of days, and then just even simply putting up some of the signs in the office to protect your own liability, to prove what you've done, that took me nearly a day just to literally put some stickers and posters up around the office. And we're a low risk, so it will have a huge impact. Risk assessments are absolutely vital, and we have got some examples and some tools that we can happily supply to part of the Wall Goodman family, where really the onus will be to make sure that as a business you've assessed the risk and made all reasonable steps and adjustments to the office environment to protect yourselves and your employees against any future claims. Certainly from an employer's liability and a public liabilities perspective, the onus and your attitude to risk will be absolutely fundamental if you are unfortunate to have a claim. So having documentation from the very, very beginning about what you understand the risks to be, what you've done to mitigate those risks, will be absolutely vital. There is no right and wrong. That's the good news with kind of risk assessments. There is no definitive yes or no answers, because each business is completely different. It's what you believe is the right thing to do, and as long as you can prove that you've considered the risks and you've accepted the risks and validated or made any changes, that will be the key area for any business returning. And then looking at the health and safety angle and making sure that you have, if you like, raised the bar in terms of dealing with health and safety matters. There are all types of posters and stickers and all sorts of things that will assist you to raise the awareness within the office, because your duty is to have a duty of care to the health and well-being of your staff. And so one of the key areas I would say with health and safety is actually communicating with a policy that also puts some of the onus back on the staff, because if you can do that, that is definitely going to help mitigate your risks with a staff policy. And again, we have got a policy that we've written that we're more than happily will share. If you've got client-facing areas, whether or not that's going to see clients face-to-face or they come into your offices, be very, very clear in having what the expectations are within that client policy as well, because your risk from a public liability perspective will be significant. And there are areas to consider in terms of GDPR as well with some of these policies. If you go to or need to go to the lengths of, say, measuring temperatures and recording temperatures of your staff, that then obviously has a wider implication from GDPR that you might need to consider. But overall, it's looking at how can you reduce your liability and your personal liability from this as well, not just from a business perspective, but also from a corporate manslaughter perspective, which I will come into shortly. Staff resources will be another thing to look at. What with the changing environment of the businesses, are you now operating 24/7, which will have an impact to obviously you're not just practically how you're running, but also the impact to the actual insurance that you have. In addition, you've got to think about what if there is a reoccurrence of the office. If you do open up your office and then you are subject to a further outbreak with one of your staff members, what is that impact going to then have to your business? So it's almost thinking back to the early stages of lockdown that we had, because that could all well happen again. So it's an opportunity to think, how can I mitigate that loss? Because that is going to have a further impact. And also, yeah, from the mental well-being of your staff and the staff resources as well, how are they going to cope returning to the office? Because you still have a duty of care within their mental health and well-being to protect them. Because again, what you don't want is any employee liability claims kind of coming through effectively neglect. You know, some stuff you might well be doing behind the scenes, but just not communicating to your staff. So that's really where the communication kind of comes in. I touched upon briefly corporate manslaughter. Hopefully it won't come to this, but you know, you have to consider that if you do come back into the office and there is an outbreak and you haven't done everything that you could reasonably do to protect your staff, then there is a justification that it could lead to corporate manslaughter. And if you cannot prove that you've actively managed or organised sufficient protection for your staff, then you could be personally liable. And at the moment, the fines are literally unlimited for corporate manslaughter if it was to go to that extent. And a personal level as well, you would actually have imprisonment penalties as well, which at the moment are ranging around about 3 to 4 years. But again, if you can mitigate and prove that you've done everything to reduce the risk, then so much the better, and that will literally stand in good stead for you. So just to really kind of reiterate some of the things that we kind of looked at to help mitigate the risk is literally looking at the posters, consider the cleaning opportunities, and how that actually will approach the business moving forward. No, it may seem a bit strange coming from an insurance perspective, but actually that will help mitigate any risk and claims moving forward. Consider the impact of your vulnerable staff, not just the pregnancies that you might actually have, but the partners of those that are pregnant, carers. You've still got all those flexible working parents as well that haven't got their children going to school. Looking at the PPE angle, it is your responsibility to provide PPE to ensure that you are protecting your staff. Again, it's actually will vary depending on whether or not your staff are volunteering to come into the office or whether or not you're forcing them to come into the office. If they're volunteering, then I would definitely use the process of a disclaimer to show that actually the responsibility is coming from the staff and that actually there are rules to abide by, but you're coming in voluntarily, and therefore the disclaimer can move forward, and that will actually mitigate your risk. But if you're forcing them to come in, you will then have to ensure that the PPE is adequate, they are fully trained on how to use it, and effectively that there is enough stock and supply. And realistically, don't be caught out by the fact that some things are in short supply. I know it sounds daft even at this point moving on, but even simple things like some of the posters that we've kind of had, you know, simple ones like now wash your hands, I'm having trouble getting hold of at the moment. So it's little things like that that actually will make a difference. So what we do have available, which we'll happily share at the end of this, is a couple of checklists just to make sure you know that you've got some proof to kind of document. This is one of many documents that we have available. So if you are interested in receiving these, or indeed a bit of a discussion point on any other documentation that we might have available to suit your specific business, then drop your email into the chat box and we'll happily get in contact with you and see if there's any other documentation that we could provide for you. These normally go at around about sort of £500 for the packs that we have available, but we're happily, as part of, you know, working with the Wool Goodman family, provide them to any of the attendees today free of charge. So yeah, just get in touch with those. So these are just simple things about returning to work, or whether or not, you know, the workplace preparedness, how prepared is the workplace, have you considered certain things? And just some of these simple documents will literally stand you in good stead to show that you've acted reasonably and taken reasonable good steps. I will now hand you over to Jason, who will then kind of pick up the rest of actually the impact this will have on your insurance needs. Over to you, Jason.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, I'm Jason Daniells. I'm the Commercial Broking Director at A1. And yeah, Sarah's gone into a lot of detail in terms of the operational issues you have and making sure that, you know, the checklists, the story of going back and how you do it. And as we've said, and we've already seen in the chat that people are putting their details down, those checklists are superb, and you know, we'd be more than proud to send those across to you. Now, from my point of view, you've done all this work, you've mitigated your risk, you've done your responsibilities, but at this time, there's a few things that are really key to making sure that once you've done your work, your back is covered in terms of risk from an insurance angle. Now, the first thing, and one that has been really talked about by Sarah in great detail, is employer's liability. You have that duty of care to your employees. Nobody wants an employee to go sick, contract COVID, perhaps die from a workplace picked up thing. And so employer's liability is really key to make sure that that's sitting there with your program of insurances and it is in place. We have public liability, of course. Now, with public liability, that's a bit different because you've got to think about allowing people back onto your premises. Sometimes you do need face-to-face meetings, and in a boardroom of 20, when you invite a guest in, those boardrooms may only fit 4 or 5. And you also need to make sure that all your things are just in place. But Zoom and everything else is probably the best way to go for now, or meeting outside. We quite often have surveys where the insurers want to walk around your premises and put things together. But any use of this lovely summer weather we've been having, except for the last couple of days, which has rained, typical, it would be good to meet outside for those kind of things. Now, Sarah also very much mentioned corporate manslaughter and your responsibilities as directors and officers. Should something not be in place, not have been done right, should you be personally sued under corporate manslaughter, under the legislation there? Directors and officers, it's always, always, always an important part of insurance for limited companies, because the company is limited in its liability by share capital, but the director himself since 2007 no longer is. There's other ways that you can be sued personally, including employment practices law, which kicks in on the directors and officers side. And guess what? While all this has been happening, people have, you know, mostly all over the world have been targeting the change in the way that everybody's having to work, having to send memos across from a computer in your home to another computer in your home, like telling the FD that we need to make a payment, make an invoice. Cyber and cyber crime has gone through the roof. It's a wonderful time when an organization is just battening down the hatches to pick on organizations. And people say, it's not me, it's just the big boys. Well, we've seen EasyJet get hacked in. They have 2,500 card records stolen. That is the big boys. But the ones we don't see is every SME that's out there. And they go, well, how would they know about little me in Bournemouth? Well, they're not. They're just going in the web and seeing who can pick up these emails. They don't care. It's random. And all it takes, doesn't matter what security you've got, is one of your staff to go, oh, fluffy kitten link. Press the link, and that way a Trojan horse or something else can come in through there, and they can monitor exactly what you're doing with your keyboard strokes and everything else. So, yeah, cybercrime is absolutely rife out there, particularly when companies are at their weakest, just trying to do their day-to-day trading. And so that is something that is key to be talked about. Motor fleet insurance. I'll flip on to the next slide about that. A lot of people have taken their vehicles off the road, particularly hauliers, particularly people that weren't working, that are now wanting them back on the road. And we'll talk about that in the next slide, of how you need to just look and change some of your insurances. And finally, not to do with insurances, but assurances, death in service, group life, relevant life. We've all now realised how fragile life is. And some of the interesting things that are going on at the moment is the requests we're having to look at death in service as a benefit for staff to make them feel better. And also, group life, relevant life, all very tax efficient ways of making sure that should the worst happen, your staff, your board have covers in that way. Sarah, can we take you on to the next slide?
Certainly can. Look, maybe. Here we go.
Perfect. Now, things have changed, and things have changed rapidly. Hopefully your insurance broker has been on the phone to you to talk. We've been trying to engage with every one of our clients to make sure that we say to them, are your turnover figures down? Is there a way we can perhaps save you money there? Do you need to lay up your vehicles? Do you need extra covers because all your laptops that you've bought are now in the homes of people? And so this change was very early on with us talking. Now it's a case of time to review again as we come back to work. There's a lot, you need to understand how much there's home workers liability, make sure your EL is extended for working at home and the insurers know what you're doing. So many people have bought laptops. We ended up, Sarah, buying something like 50 grand's worth of laptops for all the staff that didn't have them. It's a lot of money, but do you know what? It's been a great investment because they've worked from home and they've kept the business going. It's been fabulous. But I had to add all risks cover anywhere in the UK for those laptops because they're no longer in the office. So when you're looking at the equipment that you've bought and where they are, that's different. So you need to keep talking to your broker so he can change the insurance, make sure you're there. I've already mentioned it with the fleet side of things. Laid up vehicles back in use. There's two compulsory insurances. One is employer's liability, which we went into great detail, and Sarah did a great piece on how we can really make the office compliant coming back to work. But you've got the vehicles themselves need motor cover. And if you've got them laid up, you've started putting them back on the road and you forgot to put them back on the MI motor insurance database, it's not going to be long before a police officer pulls you over and finds that you haven't got any insurance cover. It's just purely admin, forgetting to add those vehicles back onto the road. Business diversifications we've seen with the easiest example is restaurants, where they've had their chefs making stuff still and then taking it out on a delivery kind of basis or independently delivering to the doors to keep their businesses going. They're not the only businesses that have been diversifying. Using, you've seen engineers and Formula One, for example, making PPE visors and looking at other systems and stuff. Wherever your market is, a lot of people have changed the way they're working. And that needs to be reflected in your business description to make sure every risk that's there is all encompassed for you. And your operating hours, a number of people have found, particularly when you've got engineering works, print workers, people like that, the old 9 to 5 doesn't work anymore. You've got a factory that used to fit 100 people, but with social distancing or a production line, it only fits 30 people. And you need to do 8-hour rotations to get all the workers that were doing the work that's needed temporarily, for now, 30 to actually work 24 hours. And that's a change of risk that you need to tell your broker and talk to insurers about. It's normally good because Although the plant or the actual production line will be going for longer, which gives risks and through the 24 hours, the security is better because nobody's going to leave the premises unattended. So one normally offsets the other, but you've got to tell your insurers what's going on, and it's all about the conversation. Limits of indemnity. Now, this is a tricky one. Obviously, when you look at, most people have £2 million worth limit of indemnity on public liability. Is that enough? If you had more, there's a number of ways with your practices that you might need to just review how much cover you've got as a business, just to think of the impacts on that. And that's really a very deep conversation with your broker that I'm not going to go into now, because we're just doing this overview touch on these things. So impact for deliveries and business travel. I've mentioned it with the public liability. Who do you have in your office? Do you send your staff out? Are they comfortable? What kind of premises are they going into? You can control the environment when you send your staff on your own premises, but if they go to see a client, how do you know that that client is up to speed with the spacing and everything else? And it's part of your checks before you let them go, because you are a caring employer and you need to make sure that if they do decide to start traveling, which they need to, because some things have to be done face to face. Zoom is very well, all good and well, but hard negotiations are normally done face to face. And we do want to get back to a new normal, but certainly a more normal. Okay, equipment inspections. Oh yeah. So the last few months, nobody's been visiting. You've got plant, you've got machinery, and a lot of equipment inspections are needed. Forklift trucks, for example, if you've got any of those, need cover every 6 months. So, we need to make sure that they're done. And additional equipment, just not wash stations extra. Just make sure your contents are of a level that they need to be. Really, with this whole presentation, the whole idea of it is review your practices, review your insurance needs, and that winds it up. Hopefully, we've scratched the surface here today, but obviously, those emails will allow you to question us in depth if there's anything that springs to mind, if you want to pick our brains. And I think I'll hand you back to Ian. Ian.
Thank you very much, Jason. That was fantastic. Really enjoyed your overview there, and you touched in so many different areas. And thank you so much, Sarah, too. I know, sorry about the bit of a false start, but obviously Sarah then into her stride,
These things happen.
Yeah, no, that's right, absolutely. And I'm sure you've had more than your fair share of business risk problems in your pub days. I understand you're a pub landlord. We've got a pub landlord.
Yes, a long time ago. Yes. long time ago.
Well, no, there we go. But you understand, right from, your very practical view, I'm sure, of business risk because of that experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And every environment is different as well. You can't just have a one size fits all. Every business is different. The way employees react and manage their own, sense of, scaredness and everything like that is completely different. So you literally have to look at each business on its own merits and do what's right for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and I'm sure your checklist will be really handy. I see Alison's on physio, great physio, keeps me going. I know I don't look the best of shapes, but, Alison keeps me moving. Alison, I see you asked for the checklist, obviously, to everybody. This is, you're on WG Hub Live, therefore you get access free to all the information that's on WG Hub. So just go to wardgoodman.com/hub. It takes us 24 hours, maybe till Monday, but we get everything loaded up. So all these presentations, last week's, they're all on, and I'm sure I know A1 are really happy to share this information, aren't you, Sarah?
Absolutely. As I say, we're happily send over our draft policy as well, because sometimes it's just knowing where to start and just using some things as a template to get you thinking, and then just tweaking it slowly. And if it's there as a template, it's going to take you, a quarter of the time to just make it suit your business. So yeah, more than happy to share.
Fantastic. No, that's great. That's wonderful. So, so what we've got a few. We have got a few insurance-related questions. So, are you happy just to? We'll just run through a few
Absolutely.
of those. I think probably Tori will take over. Are you going to read the questions out, Tori? I think we got one from Mike.
So we've actually got two. We've got one from Mahmood Punja.
Yeah, it's
He's
Mike.
asking. Sorry.
That's Mike. He's known as it's Mike.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mike. He's asking if there's a lobby to get the government to provide indemnity for charges.
Yeah, and I think what he's talking about there is the claims from the public clients due to the COVID-19 in the workplace. So, deaths of staff or clients, unfortunately, terrible situations. But, is there going to be any sort of government support, I guess, providing, any kind of cover for businesses?
At the moment, I mean, Jason, you can jump in with this as well. I would say at the moment, it's very much an evolving beast, if you like, and there's literally every day small snippets are kind of coming out. There is lots of activity behind the scenes with the insurance industry and the government kind of working together, trying to figure out best solutions, trying to kind of move forward in what is best practice, and what they can do. I think, again, it's a really tricky one. I don't even think the government probably knows at the moment, if I'm completely honest. So I've not heard of anything official in terms of the charges in relation to, if you like, any liability costs and financial compensation. I'm not aware of that at the moment. There's still some work being done on test cases to see whether or not the validity of any claims are first valid before they then move on to the next stage.
Okay.
Yeah, when it comes to employers' liability, it's a compulsory insurance. Everybody's got it. And what the employer would have to do is show that they've been negligent, COVID's come into their workplace and somebody has died. And then, you get sued for your negligent. Well, with the slides, with the way that you do your risk assessments and everything else, it's very unlikely that anybody would be found negligent on a pandemic side of things. So there shouldn't be a need for that, and it's not being talked about greatly at the moment. But yeah, we're certainly keeping a watching brief on everything.
Fantastic. Okay. No, that's fair enough. I mean, I think the government have covered so many areas, and just keep building on that cover at the moment in various, and as different things, come out, they're trying to address those. And I mean, it's just, there's something from every direction, isn't there?
Yeah. There is.
And that's the problem, I think. So,
Peter, next.
Yeah, Peter White.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
So he's asking, private medical insurance, what changes do you think we will see in the market over the next 12 to 18 months? Premiums, waiting times, new services, etc.
Yeah, in terms of, we have an expert, Alex, that does most of our private medical bits and pieces, and waiting times is an issue, because I know that at the moment, because if anybody's noticed, I've got a little gap in my tooth where I cracked a tooth and I haven't been able to put an implant in. And the private the private hospitals have been used by the NHS at the moment, and still very much still are, and haven't been released back to private times. So waiting times will certainly be impacted. Premiums, I don't see too much of a difference with private medical premiums, because it's just what they cover. I mean, COVID is something that you be whipped into hospital and will be treated NHS style. Private medical is very much about all those elective surgeries, all those things that you desperately need. And I don't see an impact on premiums particularly there. And new services, well, who knows how the market will react in terms of pandemic, and if you're in for a pandemic, do you get a private room and all that kind of thing? Well, the idea of pandemics really they're just a disaster that have to be managed by the government. So I can't see them doing any new services there. But certainly in that question, the waiting times are going to be interesting, because I'm already waiting for my new tooth.
That's fine. It looks like we've got a follow-up, but I've just got a text message in actually from somebody on. So yeah, please feel free to text me, or I absolutely put your questions through the Q&A or the chat. But there's an active question. I think it might be for our Gareth, actually. Gareth Simon from Ward Goodman here. You can't not have a question, Gareth, which is apparently it's a follow-on question from that about the impact on shareholder protection. Are we going to be able to get some shareholder protection now, given the issues? Is that going to be expensive?
No, we can certainly still arrange that. I think it's a good question. I think shareholder protection opens up probably a bigger debate about business protection generally. Obviously, shareholder protection is one aspect. What I would say, Ian, is what we're seeing at the moment. We've got a number of inquiries about key person protection, because the last 3 or 4 months, I think, has clearly shown that there are certain key members of staff in every business. I'm sure Sarah and Jason will probably agree with this, that the last 3 or 4 months has shown us that you've got to make sure that you've got adequate protection in for those people and make a big difference to your business. Whether that's a sales manager or operational director, whoever it may be. And I think, shareholder protection, business protection, and I think Jason mentioned earlier, relevant life. I certainly think for the business owner clients out there, we do talk to our business owner clients a lot about relevant life, because it's a more tax efficient way of providing life cover. And I think it's a combination of things. At the moment, we've not seen any issues in terms of trying to put protection in place and on risk. I think there's been some delays with insurance companies. I'm sure Sarah and Jason have found this, that they're a lot slower in getting back to us at the moment, but certainly we've not seen a significant increase in premiums. But if clients have seen it, then as I said, it may be worth considering rebroking the insurance or doing it in a slightly different way. As I said, relevant life, we've done a fair bit of relevant life insurance work the last 3 or 4 months, and I think we'll see an increase in that.
Yeah, well, thanks, Gareth. Yeah, I mean, we tend to look from our perspective, not a sort of pure generalist, so it's more about business risk, isn't it? From Ward Goodman's perspective, we look at the overall business risk, and obviously, there's so many different angles, and that's why, we do partner with A1 Insurance to just give people that sort of little bit of a view on business cover, and you can get, obviously a quote or anything you need in terms of an analysis of your liability. At this moment in time, I'm sure you could offer that, can't you, Jason? So,
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I like putting people on a spot. You can do it. Anyway,
Ian, perhaps it's worth saying that following on from that, we're probably going to do another session on business risk, aren't we? And in terms of the Ward Goodman clients, we do an annual risk assessment, and that covers a whole host of issues. Including insurances, and in terms of business protection, the wider issue of business protection, how you value shareholdings, we can help there as well in terms of business valuations, and obviously company valuations.
Yeah, because they're going to be affected over the next few months, and there's no doubt. Well, thanks very much. So we've got a couple of other questions. We've got a question from Jen. As an individual, people working in their house, cleaner, plumber, etc., you get all the trades in. Well, if they'll come, but obviously there has been a lot of emergency work as well. What would you advise in terms of a risk assessment? That's it's an interesting angle from individual.
Sarah, if you take that one, I'll take the elephant in the room with Lee in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's it's communicating with the client that you're going to see in the first instance. I think if you're going in to visit in someone's home, I think you have to be fully prepared for everything and actually make them aware of what your protocols are in terms of, that you've got the right PPE equipment, that you are wearing it, and what you will be doing, and you might have your own expectations of what you want the person, the homeowner, to actually do? Do you want them to physically not be in the room, or to be, you know, 2 meters apart, or can they actually come into the house a different way so they're not even path, you know, sharing the same corridor, which I know I've had here before now, actually. It's literally someone said, I need to come through your garage, which is completely unheard of, you know, but that's the way that they wanted to work. And I think it's actually down to the individuals, and actually your duty is to make sure that you're protecting the clients that you're going to see, and actually having a conversation with them before you attend as to what their expectations are, because they are going to worry, they're going to vary, and checking that they've got no one that's shielding in the home as well. You know, and I think that's key, is really just having that. You might want to consider, do you actually have a sheet that you actually leave your client as well? So they've actually got something there, so you're actually fully protecting yourself to say you have followed these particular PP guidance rules whilst visiting and attending your premises, just to kind of cover all bases, really.
So from the actual homeowners, you know, position, do you think you ought, you know, we have to have a risk assessment, or is it up to the tradesman to come in?
I would say personally it's up to the tradesman. I mean, and that, you know, that you don't need to, it's down to the tradesman. I think they're the ones coming into your home. It's a private property, they're coming into your home, and therefore, you know, the risk is really with them, because they would be bringing something in, and you're paying for their services. So that's really where I would go from that perspective. I think it would definitely be down to the person coming in to do the risk assessment, as opposed to the other way around.
Okay. Right. So we have so this is the question. So Jason saved himself. He said, I saw this question coming, so I know the answer.
Well, to be quite honest, that was when you said to me something, and I just saw that one there, and it caught me. That's when I said yes, we'd be happy to help with all the quotes and checks when you do your reviews. But that one was the elephant in the room, and I won't take too long with it.
Okay, so here I better read the question. So force majeure is a phrase that has been bandied about a lot during the past few months. Do you see the claim process is becoming more difficult, with insurance companies looking for loopholes in cover?
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Heavily weighted.
This one.
You want to take this one, Jason?
Yeah. This is quite interesting. Okay, so this is all around business interruption. Now, insurers are very, very, very good at business interruption claims, but they're for fire, they're for floods, there's for storm damage off your roof. You know, something happens major with a traditional material damage style claim, it's there. Some policies, like 1% of policies, have had extensions put into them that have been very poorly written and didn't see COVID coming. Funnily enough, none of us saw COVID coming in February. It was a bit like a flu, said one president. They'll go away after 15 Americans are killed, but we won't go there. So with that, it's a fundamental risk. Anything that is war, anything that is government action, anything that is nuclear risk, are risks that are about the government and what the government do. If you had, as we've been discussing, if you had your premises had somebody that had COVID, coughed all over your premises, and you had interruption for 3 days, it was deep cleaned, and everybody could go back to it, that's covered. That's there. But what you've got is this business interruption, which is completely outside anything that has come before. And so, yeah, the Chancellor very early on made a thing saying business interruption, you should get cover. Well, cover for something that never been seen before. And many other policies that included infectious diseases had got rid of, from the 2003 SARS epidemic, they've had specific exclusions in there for these kind of respiratory kind of pandemic stuff. The kind of premiums that you'd need would be huge. And we've seen it before in terrorism, where saw the St Mary's Axe bombs and things like that. And Paul Re came about because of terrorism to that extent. Because if you look, Aviva do about £3.5 billion a year in turnover as an insurance company. They're the most well-known of our providers. The government's looking at 350 billion in relief for businesses. No insurer can do that. It needs to be a government pandemic re, but it was never thought of before. And would you really, if you're paying a £350 shop policy, want to pay another couple of thousand a year just in case of pandemic? It's just probably unsustainable, and it's a fundamental risk that's out there. That is why governments need to step in, and the insurance industry has had quite a bit of a press going on about this, but really think about it, it's all about fires, it's all about storms, it's all about cessation of trading because the police have denied you access to a road. There's access out there. Anybody can, but you can't because the government is saying stay at home. And so it's a fundamental risk, I'm afraid, and hence how the word force majeure and everything else comes in.
However, behind the scenes, there is some government testing that is going on. They are testing the wordings and things like that at the moment to actually see the in-depthness of what will actually stand up moving forward. But that is going to take months to actually run through, to actually be tried and tested, to see how everything kind of stacks up from that side of things. Yeah. So again, it's an evolving beast. If you've got a strong insurance broker with a claims team within them, they will be there to help and support you. Whether or not if they believe that there is a small chance that that there is a chance to kind of win on the wording, then they will act on your behalf and will support you through all of that. And we're doing the same with some of our clients, where even with the financial ombudsman, we're helping them take it further because we believe that there is some ambiguity enough to think, this is worth a significant challenge. So your brokers will be there to help you, support you through claims processes as well. And if they believe it's a strong enough valid case, then they will be there to help you.
Can I just ask another question that's been asked to me? Do you, in terms of a general insurance policy, so the general thing that sold, the combined business policy and that sort of thing, is there anything that our viewers, is there anything in a combined policy that could help them at this time? Is there anything in there that perhaps you wouldn't read? If you know what I mean, I don't know how many people read insurance policies, but I'm not sure that I've got all the way down to the bottom even, and I read documents. So, but is there anything that can help the clients at the moment?
At the moment, the one thing that's always interesting is if you've got any legal queries, and it's not necessary that you've had a claim or anything, but a lot of policies have legal expense helplines at the bottom of them. And if you're not sure about which way to go, the nice thing is with Ward Goodman and A1 here, we've been able to give your community of people help with health and safety and back to work and talking about legislation and everything else. A lot of people don't have that. And those legal expense helplines right at the bottom of your policy, if there's 10 things, it'll be the 10th thing with people like DAS and ARIG and other providers. They're always good. So you're never quite fully alone if you've got legal expenses helplines, because that's exactly what they are, just a helpline. They're not going to get you a lawyer out for things, but they will try to give the best advice possible, and you can then consider that advice. It's not like having your own lawyer, but it is a good source to get information.
Going back to your original questioning, the thing is with policy wordings, there are so vast. There's not a one size, there's not a common theme that runs through every insurer. They are all so different. And then even if you go to the same provider, Aviva say for the same product, they will be able to and do put in specific areas based on the risk that they're presented with. So no two policies and policy wordings are ever the same.
Absolutely, Sarah. I think probably the point to make to the audience is just get a review.
Yeah.
review, because I think the thing that we see often is quite often people just let policies just annual renew, and they don't get it reviewed. I think this is probably the opportune time to get things looked at.
Absolutely. I mean, we're already seeing literally some of the insurers, even now at renewals, slipping in little exclusions specifically about COVID moving forward. Yeah, even in some of the innocuous policies that you kind of think, well, why is that in there? But they're covering themselves to try and put it in there straight away. So I think you'll see some significant changes in the next 12 months to insurance policies that will need a full review to make sure that you've got them covered. That it's not an assumption that what you had before is the same as what you've got when you come to renew.
And you're absolutely right, Gareth. A lot of this time they tick along because the price is right. The review, we always want value, and we always find value for our clients, but it's that actual wording, it's the quality of the insurer, it's those other things that make the whole package. It's not just, there's a lot of cheap price out there that can always be got, but wordings, trusting that the claims people, trusting that they're an A-rated insurer, that you can, will be there, because it's only a bit of paper and until that time of need. And we're very lucky to be, having good clients and explain what they've got. So the review is everything.
Say thank you so much, Sarah, Jason. You've gone through so much stuff in this short time. Really appreciate it, and thanks for all the questions from all the viewers. We're getting a great audience, and thank you so much for coming on board. We keep asking for new subject matters. We've got quite a few. We've got lots lined up right into July now, but come back to us, please, with the content that you'd like to see. Next week, all about cybersecurity, IT, the risks of home working, all your team working at home or part working. So we've got we've got an expert on cybercrime coming on, also some IT guys. And so hopefully come back next week, 10 o'clock, here on Friday next week. And you can go into the realms of cybersecurity and IT. Really, thank you very much for our speakers today, and I wish you a great weekend. So see you next week.